There is a fear that if the left ever regains control of this country again, our nation is finished. And look, I said this on Fox and Friends yesterday, and the president retweeted my comments last night. Look, the Democrats knew they couldn't beat him at the ballot box in 2016. They are becoming increasingly aware of the fact that they can't beat him in 2020 either.
Oopsie daisy, sounds like a false prophecy to me. I don't know if this is a prophecy. This might have been a prediction rather than a prophecy. But the guy speaking in that clip was named Robert Jeffress, and he's extremely influential within the televangelist community. You may not have heard of him because he works behind the scenes a lot, but he's extremely influential. Oh, my God. He knows Donald Trump. He's worked with Donald Trump. He's been retweeted by Trump 1,000 times. He is one of those evangelical leaders that Trump calls when he needs something, when he wants to bolster his credibility or his image among evangelicals. He's a televangelist, effectively. So Jeffress had a prediction for us. He said Donald Trump is unbeatable in 2020 at the ballot box, so Democrats are trying to impeach him. I think this is from when was this? 2019. Yeah, this is early October 2019. So 1 year before the votes are going to be cast for the 2020 election. Keep listening to what he had to say here on this radio show he did.
Impeachment is the only option they have to remove Donald J. Trump from office.
Of course, he wasn't removed from office, and the impeachment really had no effect on him at all. This guy was just complaining about absolutely nothing.
And look, I heard this sanctimonious Nancy Pelosi this weekend calling for prayer for our country and praying for prayer. Look,
praying for prayer. Go on.
It reminds me of an arsonist, a pyromaniac with a match in his hand about to set a building on fire saying, now pray with me that the destruction I'm about to cause isn't too severe.
So this guy is saying that impeachment is basically burning the country down? Is that what he's saying? It sounds like a runaway analogy to me.
Cause isn't too severe. I mean, if he's sincere, he'll put down the dang match. And if Nancy Pelosi is sincere about bringing this nation together, she will drop this impeachment effort. Let the American people decide 1 year from now at the ballot box.
And that they did. The American people decided overwhelmingly that Donald Trump should not be in government at all. Shouldn't be anywhere near it. Of course, they just deny that and pretend that he was elected, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's all they do. Just lie about it constantly. Biden got, I think 10 million more votes or something like that than Donald Trump did. Of course, it was a lot narrower than that because of gerrymandering and the Electoral College. I think Biden won by about 40,000 votes across 3 states. Trump won against Hillary by about 70,000 votes across 5 states. Quick interjection, this won't take long. If you like what I do, I'd appreciate it if you watch the video to the end. YouTube bases video reach off of watch time, so watching even an extra minute makes the video go further. Liking and subscribing goes a long way too. Finally, it would be awesome if you guys checked out my Patreon. All links are in the description, of course. Okay, back to the video. But Biden got 10 million more votes than Trump overall. The people spoke. The people wanted Biden, not Trump. Simple as that. And of course, this guy is going to make all kinds of ridiculous claims to make it out as though he was right all along. That's the evangelical playbook.
Ballot box, but she is uncomfortable. She's scared to death at
talking about Nancy Pelosi.
What the American people will choose to do, and that is to keep Donald J. Trump in office.
You know, we just assumed.
Yeah, I mean, that would be scary, but the people chose, so.
J. Trump in office.
You know, we just assume they're praying to God. I'm not quite sure. I don't know, Dr. Jeffress. I mean, they booed God, tried to vote him out of the party platform.
What? What is he talking? Who booed God? Tried to vote him out of the party platform? What? I remember this. This was being spread around the Republican Party for a while. It was a claim that Democrats removed God from the party platform and said that they were the party of the atheists, I think. Matter of fact, so this is Brenda Kunneman. She's another supposed prophet of God, you know, that type of person. This is from 2022, late January 2022.
I can't find anything, and believe me, I've looked, anything on the left that is good to support.
Let's see. Ending slavery. Yes, it still exists. I would love to end prison slavery. Equal rights for everybody. There are a ton of things on the left that are totally good to support. Not to mention the fact that the stock market does significantly better under left-leaning presidents than it does under right-leaning presidents. That's neither here nor there.
Okay, it's filled with lies and homosexuality and abominations. And, you know, in fact, the party, I'll just say it, the Democrat Party put straight up on their platform, that we are the party of the non-religious. We don't want God. We're atheists. That's what they've said. You can go read it yourself.
No, you can't, because it's fake. Is that what this guy, Robert Jeffress, is talking about right now? This is another one of those things. It's like the claim that Obama killed Christmas, not allowed to say Merry Christmas anymore. No, that never happened. What are you talking about? It's completely fabricated. Like, these people live in an alternate reality. They must be doing this knowingly and intentionally, right? They can't possibly believe any of this.
Not quite sure. I don't know, Dr. Jeffress. I mean, they booed God, tried to vote him out of the party platform.
No, they didn't. It's like when you hear somebody say something so direct and brazen, you gotta think, like, they wouldn't lie to your face, right? There's gotta be a grain of truth here. No, there isn't. They're just lying, flat out saying false things.
I mean,
well, and apparently the God they worship is the God of the pagan God of the Old Testament, Moloch, who allowed for child sacrifice. I mean, the God of the Bible doesn't sanction the killing of millions and millions.
Oh, no? Go ahead, finish your sentence there, Robert. The God of the Old Testament doesn't sanction the killing of millions of what?
I mean, the God of the Bible doesn't sanction the killing of millions and millions of children in...
Yeah, he kind of does, actually. In fact, he did it multiple times in the Bible. There's a standing order today. If you find any Midianites, you're supposed to murder them as a Christian. Or as a Jewish person, I'm not sure. And maybe it's not Midianites, I don't remember. One of the groups that God had genocided at his command, whichever one that happened to be. The point is, God ordered genocide like nonstop through the Old Testament, but that's neither here nor there. Now, I understand what he's talking about here. He's taking a shot at Roe versus Wade. He's taking a shot at abortion. That's not what's happening. It's not a baby when it is literally 150 cells. When it is, do you know how many cells there are in the brain of a fly? There are about 150 cells in a blastocyst, right? A very small, fertilized human embryo. 150 cells. Would you guess that there are 1,000 cells in the brain of a fruit fly? Would you guess there are 50,000? 80,000? 100,000? 150,000? 200,000 cells in the brain of a fruit fly. We're talking about 150 cells in a blastocyst. So I don't want to hear any of this nonsense about it's a baby and God loves babies and you're killing babies. Blah, blah, blah. It's completely made up. Fruit flies and mosquitoes are brainier than you think. They have about 200,000 brain cells, providing a baseline for their complex behaviors, say scientists who counted the bug's cells. 150 cells. Stem cell research was banned because people were taking an egg and a sperm cell and joining them until it was like 150 cells and using that to heal people, to cure cancer, to cure blindness, to regrow limbs. But it's banned because it's a baby. No, it's not. God did sanction genocide, though. I can't believe he even went there. Quick note before we continue, I'm writing a book about my experiences inside the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses. I cover the culture and doctrine. It's understandable even if you know literally nothing about the religion, so I'd appreciate if you gave it a read. To find out more, go to owenmorgan.com/book. All links are in the description, of course. Okay, back to the video.
Who allowed for child sacrifice. I mean, the God of the Bible doesn't sanction the killing of millions and millions of children in the womb.
Well, he did that all the time.
I think the God they are worshiping is the God of their own imagination.
Says Robert Jeffress. You've got to love it. Anyway, I want to go through Robert Jeffress again. I want to talk about him because it's been forever since we've talked about him. He's releasing a new book, believe it or not. The title, Are we living in the end times? Listen to his ad on Fox News.
Terrorist attacks against Israel, escalating threats of a third world war, natural disasters, and civil unrest are causing people to wonder, are we living in the end times?
I mean, there has literally not... Do you know how many years of peace there have been in the past 6,000 years? I just read this in my fun fact book. Hang on, let me look it up, make sure. Out of the past 3,400 years... there have only been 268 years of peace. Just 8% of recorded history, according to the New York Times. 268 years of peace out of the past 3,400. So go on about World War III. Keep telling me. What are you asking me now?
Disasters and civil unrest are causing people to wonder, are we living in the end times?
In his new book, Are We Living in the End Times?, trusted pastor and best-selling author Dr. Robert Jeffress provides solid biblical answers to 7 key questions, including, what role does Israel play in the end times? What 5 headlines will signal we are in the end times? And how can you prepare for the end times? Are We Living in the End Times by Dr. Robert Jeffress.
Dude, I should get this book and read it on stream. I think that'd be fascinating.
Robert Jeffress is available right now at ptv.org and wherever fine books are sold.
Jesus said, no one knows the hour or day of his return, which is why we should be ready at all times. Jesus is coming back to earth one day. Are you ready? Get your copy of my new book, Are We Living in the End Times?
Okay, that's going to be a hard pass for me. No, thank you, sir. I find it interesting that he's, like, promoting his book, though. I think this was on Fox News, this ad was. I had no idea how expensive books were to produce, but how much money they can generate. I mean, I'm not looking at selling anywhere near as many copies as Jeffress is selling. Jeffress will probably sell 30,000 copies. That's my guess, 30,000 copies. Just hypothetically speaking, if he sells it for $30 and he spends $5 per copy on editing and printing and binding and cover art and the everything else, all of it. Say $5 a copy goes to the publisher or whatever. He sells 30,000 copies, $25 each. That's $750,000. It is so easy to get filthy rich with a book if it sells well. I'm not expecting mine to sell anywhere near that well. Oh my God. That's like New York Times bestseller territory. That's just not happening for me. But my point is, that's why Jeffress is shouting out his book. If he gets even 100 sales from this Fox News ad or whatever, he's made like $3,000 right there. Anyway, I just want to talk about who this guy is, because he's worked behind the scenes for years and years to erode separation of church and state. So let's talk about probably his most famous clip here. Give this one a listen. This is from mid-June 2020.
Here's the question. There are those that would say that...
There are those that would say weasel words right out the gate. Go on.
The separation clause of the Constitution would mandate that all public discourse be totally secular.
No. Okay, first of all, there's no separation clause. What are you talking about? It's the establishment clause, not the separation clause. And what did you say that it does?
That all public discourse be totally secular.
No. It says that the government cannot force people to be part of a state religion. It can't make any laws establishing a religion. It can't favor one religion over another. That is what the Establishment Clause says. And it was clarified in great detail by Thomas Jefferson in his letters to Danbury Baptist Church. Like, even the question asked is nonsense. But okay, go on.
Do you believe that the separation clause mandates secular discourse?
By the way, he said there are those who would say, who? Who would say that? Nobody.
Well, first of all, there is no separation clause.
Correct. It's the Establishment Clause.
It doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution. There's no such thing as a separation of church and state.
Well, Thomas Jefferson did write a letter to Danbury Baptist about separation of church and state. That's where the term came from. He said there should be a wall between church and state. He said there shouldn't be a connection between the two. They should stay completely separate. Now, you can disagree with him on that if you'd like, but he said it. That was part of the government. He was the president. He went on to become the president after saying that. And he and the Supreme Court worked together to establish what we understand about the Establishment Clause today. How do they misunderstand the first sentence of the First Amendment of the Constitution? You can't convince me that they believe any of this. They're doing this to further their goals, right? They cannot be this ignorant on the subject.
Separation of church and state in the Constitution. What the First Amendment says is Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Right. Separation between church and state. Church will do what it wants to do. State will do what it wants to do, and they will not meet. Their paths will not join at any point. That was the goal. And again, it was clarified through countless Supreme Court rulings, letters to different churches between the Founding Fathers and others. We understand this without question, and he knows that.
Prohibiting the free exercise.
Oh, and by the way, what the hell is he holding right now? Why is he holding like 16 books? He's speaking to an audience. What is he even doing right now?
Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Our forefathers came from another country where there was a state-imposed church.
Yep.
Where people were forced to worship. They wanted no part of that.
Absolutely. That's correct. Yes.
They said, we're not going to allow government to establish a state church and coerce people to worship in it.
Well, they said they said more than that. If you've read the letters between Jefferson and Danbury Baptist, which they're available, I've read them on stream before, you'll see that the Founding Fathers, the presidents, the signers and framers of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the other founding documents, they did not want church and state to meet. You can disagree with that assessment. You can say, well, I think they should or whatever. But trying to change the interpretation of what they plainly said is a joke and shameless. They're just lying.
And coerce people to worship in it. That's all it says. It has nothing to say about Ten Commandment displays in schools.
And what do you think that is exactly? A school is a government program where kids are mandated to show up. It is a government-controlled and sponsored education center. What would you call it when a teacher who is, endowed by the state to disseminate information about the world around us to students? And if the student doesn't show up, the parents go to jail. They are compelled to show up. They must be there. So the state is forcing children, which I'm in favor of, by the way. I'm fine with that. I think it's good for kids to go to school. I'm saying the kids are forced to show up and listen to what this agent of the state has to say to them. Now, what would you call it when this state actor starts pushing religious beliefs down people's throats? I would say that's the government establishing a religion, wouldn't you? I would say that's the government favoring one religion over another. No, it didn't mention the Ten Commandments because the Founding Fathers didn't think people would be too stupid to understand what they meant. But here we sit.
Nothing to say about Ten Commandment displays in schools, nativity scenes in the public squares, or prayers at the graduation. In 1980, the Supreme Court in Stone v. Graham said...
Wait, 1980? Wait a minute. This is the thing that we were listening to earlier. 1980, Stone v. Graham. Okay, we're going to look that up in a minute. Let's just keep listening. 1980, Stone v. Graham.
At the graduation. In 1980, the Supreme Court in Stone v. Graham said, you can no longer display the Ten Commandments in a Kentucky school. Can't even display them, much less teach them.
Yeah, that's because that is a state institution establishing a religion, favoring one religion over another. how would you feel if they put a statue of Shiva the Destroyer right in the center of the school that every kid had to walk by and look at every single day of their lives? How would you feel about that one? He would throw a hissy fit, if a statue of Shiva was placed in a school for students to walk by every day. He would lose it. By the way, just think about the term hissy fit and its origins. It's kind of funny when you think about it, right? My cats throw hissy fits all the time. When they're hungry, they swat at each other and they get into hissy fit mode. It's bad. Gotta feed them on time. Anyway, Robert Jeffress is throwing a hissy fit here, and it's ridiculous. Get over yourself.
Even display them, much less teach them. What's interesting, Clark, is 118 years before that, a similar case came before the Supreme Court of whether the Bible could be read in school. And the Supreme Court said unanimously, and I'm quoting, "Why may not the Bible, especially the New Testament, be taught as God's revelation? Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament?" Now, that was the Supreme Court 118 years earlier.
Okay. 1844. I looked into this case, and my wife looked into the case too. Before talking about the case, I want to point out that this is like, right now in history, 2024, we have a group of Christian nationalists, these people, for example, trying to put Ten Commandments statues into schools, right? Obviously. We have people trying to force pictures of the Ten Commandments in every single classroom. And it's working in some cases. What he's doing right now is similar to if somebody in 200 years looked back to the 2020s and said, why was it okay in 2020 for them to put up Ten Commandments statues all that time ago, but we reversed it? That's effectively what's happening right now. He is effectively using incorrect Supreme Court rulings that did not represent what the original founders wanted. He's using those rulings as the basis to establish more wrong rulings. Now, not only is he doing that, but he's getting the case completely wrong. That is not what the case was about at all. My wife is in law school. She's going to talk about the case just a little bit, so I'm going to flip the microphone over to her.
All right, y'all are going to have to bear with me. Sorry, I'm not on stream. I have a face mask going, so... Okay, so I'm not a fan of trust in estates, and I'm not a fan of 1800s Supreme Court case rulings. So, this was something to get through for me. But essentially this case that's being talked about, Vidal versus Girard's executors, it's a case about, can somebody in his will give property over to a city in order to establish, a school for orphans? It's not doing what the guys are talking about. It's not saying that, the Bible needs to be in schools. What was specifically referenced in that clip was dicta. It wasn't the holding of the case. Basically, the part that's being referenced is this giant long paragraph that is basically just rambling. It's not really building up to anything about the actual holding of the case, the thing that's precedential. Instead, it's just kind of 1800s prose. Eventually, though, the point of this case was the person who was giving the land over to the city of Philadelphia, I believe it was, said that he wanted a school to be established as long as there wasn't religion being taught. And under this holding, basically, that was, as far as I can tell, because again, this is 1800s and trust in estates, they basically said that's fine because he's not going against the common law of Pennsylvania, which included a blasphemy statute that was actually only found unconstitutional in 2010. But because of that, it was fine. They're actually, the holding of this case, again, from what I can tell, is just saying it's all right for there not to be religion in schools, going against what the guys on stream are saying. It's an absolute mess. And really the only thing they're doing is showing that they don't understand how to read a case or how case law works or how precedents work. Because, even if I'm completely wrong about my understanding of this case, which is very, very likely considering, again, trust in estates, 1800s, the thing that would have said, like, you can't impugn Christianity was found unconstitutional, like, 14 years ago. So they don't really have a leg to stand on here, but that's not really surprising considering the Christian nationalists. They never have a leg to stand on.
Okay, so that was a summary of why the guy is completely wrong in what he said about that case. The bottom line is the guy was, from my understanding, cherry-picking things from the case. The case wasn't even about what he's saying. All that stuff was like superfluous language that had nothing to do with anything. The case was about, a guy left, I think, $7 million to a charity and wanted that money to be used to create a school or orphanage or whatever charity that did not use the Bible as classroom materials. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the question was all really about...
basically, it's about whether a city can, establish this orphanage, this charity that was devised to it in a will. It's all about, inheritance law, nothing to do with, religion and an establishment of religion.
Right. The case was actually, I think one of the parties was the executors of the will. So the point is that this had nothing to do with what he's talking about. Is anybody really surprised by that? The reason that I wanted to go so deep into understanding what this case is all about is because all you have to do is search "why may not the Bible" in quotes on Google, and you get like 1 billion Christian websites holding this up as the bastion of, this is exactly what everybody thought, until those evil atheists came along in 2019 and decided to insert the separation of church and state that wasn't there before, blah, 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 That's the kind of thing that these people do. So I wanted to make sure that this is not representative of reality, what he's saying. I wanted to really understand one way or another. And I came to find that he's completely full of it. Of course. Is he lying on purpose, knowingly? Is he accidentally lying? Is he spreading misinformation by mistake? Or does he know what he is doing? Either he heard that from somebody who was intentionally lying, or he found that case and intentionally lied about it. Somewhere along the way, somebody intentionally lied about what he just said, about that quote. This is a complete misrepresentation of the entire thing. I know it's a little thing, but think about it. This is what the far-right Christian nationalist group does. They pick little things and turn it into something that it absolutely wasn't. And they use it to bolster their own credibility.
Teach them. What's interesting, Clark, is 118 years before that, a similar case came before the Supreme Court of whether the Bible could be read in school.
No, it was not about that at all. It had to do with charities and how they're established and how religion interacts with charities. Something to that effect.
And the Supreme Court said unanimously, and I'm quoting,
well, the vote was unanimous, but what he's quoting from was the opinion piece, which was, this is part of the dicta, and that the dicta means it was superfluous aside from the main point. It was just extra stuff. It's just extra. It was not relevant to the case itself. They just added this in because it was kind of tangentially related a little bit.
Why may not the Bible, especially the New Testament, be taught as God's revelation? Where can the principles of morality be so clearly found than the New Testament? Now, that was the Supreme Court 118 years earlier.
Well, that was probably the guy who wrote the Supreme Court's opinion, majority opinion. I guess there was no minority opinion because there was no minority. It was unanimous.
And every time I'm on Fox debating some of these pinheads from the ACLU.
Pinheads? Oh, people just going nuts, just clapping their hands raw. They're left with stubs at the end, rubbing them against each other because they're so glad to hear somebody taking a shot at the ACLU, those terrible losers. The religious aspect was secondary to whether someone could give property to a city for a specific purpose as part of their will. That was the point of the case.
ACLU.
Stupid ACLU pinheads.
I asked them the question. I say, now tell me, why is it in the mid-1800s you could read and teach the New Testament, but suddenly the Supreme Court decides 118 years later that you can't even post the Ten Commandments?
I'll tell you why, as a matter of fact. Because A, you completely misinterpreted what that case meant, and B, they got away from what the Constitution originally intended. They got away from what the framers of the Constitution, the presidents of the time, the founders, the writers of the Constitution, you got away from what they wanted. They got away from it. In the 1800s, they were changing the way things worked to be more religious. They established a state religion, effectively, in the 1800s, the mid-1800s, after the framers were dead. Now, after that absolutely insane explosion of right-wing traditionalist Christian nutcases died off, we all kind of got back to what the framers intended originally, which was a separation of church and state. We're not even fully there. But obviously we have quote-unquote pinheads trying to cram religion down our throats once again. You know, I think this probably came out after the clip that I'm about to show you, so if you saw the previous video that released, or maybe it released on my main channel, I'm not sure, you've probably already seen this video. Let me just show you just a second of this House member in Texas absolutely shredding this woman.
And it's not one that I want to be a part of. It's not one that I think I am a part of. You know that in Scripture it says faith without works is what? Dead. Is dead. My concern is instead of bringing a bill that will feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, we're instead mandating that people put up a poster.
Poster of the Ten Commandments in every classroom in Texas. Instead of actually increasing food stamps to help the hungry. Instead of creating a clothing program where people who don't have clothes for school can go to this warehouse and get clothing. Instead of creating a program where the homeless can have a home, can have stability. As Jesus taught. As Jesus taught was a prerequisite for entering the kingdom of God. Instead of any of that, they're trying to post a graven image in the classroom. And what is our buddy Robert Jeffress doing? Is he following Jesus' example?
18 years later that you can't even post the Ten Commandments. What changed? Did the Constitution change and nobody told us about it?
No, the people in 1844 changed their interpretation of the Constitution, tried to shove religion down everyone's throats. After all those nutcases died off, we got back to what the founders originally intended.
Of course not. The Constitution hasn't changed, but what has changed is this. We have allowed the atheists, the secularists, the humanists to hijack our Constitution and pervert it into something our forefathers never intended. That's what the problem is. I'm going to say this, and it may cost me some book sales, but...
Oh, I bet. It's going to cost him some book sales. Oh, boy. Yeah, just wait. His voice is going to crack like he's a 12-year-old girl in a second. Yeah, he's going to say the hard things, right? I love God. That's hard to say. Nobody likes to hear it. It's going to cost me some book sales because I'm going to say it anyways. God is the best. He is such a martyr, dude. Get over yourself.
I'm going to say this, and it may cost me some book sales, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thank God we have a president like Donald J. Trump who understands that.
Absolutely cringy, dude. Does it get more cringy than that? I just want to play that for you one more time so we're all on the same... Look, see him sticking... He's got his tongue out right now. He's going to squish his tongue down a little bit, right? See? Sticking his tongue down. And then he's going to yell and let his voice crack on the way out as loud as he can.
Thank God we have a president...
Oh, Robert Jeffress. Yeah. Boy, he definitely lost some book sales for that one, I bet.
Thank God we have a president like Donald J. Trump who understands that.
Yeah, totally. Lost some book sales to that one. One more thing from Robert Jeffress I want to show you guys. This one's already getting a little bit long, but let me just show you a little thing from this guy all the way back from 2018. Yeah, okay, so there was an election on its way. This was late October 2018, so the election was like within weeks, I think, of when this came out. It's a midterm election, so voting for the House members, the senators, and so on and so forth. Something I noticed that you'll notice too if you haven't already is that every time an election comes around, all the Republicans talk about is the border. You won't hear another thing from them. Have you heard a word from Republicans about abortion in the past 6 months? It's a subject that they completely avoid. Yeah, I'm looking at old clips right now, and we've heard some people talk about it in old clips. But this is a subject, abortion, that people won't touch with a 10-foot pole because they know it's toxic to them right now. But you know what they think isn't toxic to them?
I want to ask you about Governor John Kasich saying that caravan, God intended that caravan be allowed to cross our border.
Caravan of illegals, quote unquote. In 2018, these people were losing their minds because there was supposedly a caravan of illegal immigrants who were passing through Central America and through Mexico trying to get into the United States. And who knows, there might be terrorists in there. I'm not even joking. That's what they were saying at the time. Does that sound familiar to anybody else?
I'm paraphrasing him. I mean, but does God want that?
Does God want the poorest, the most downtrodden, beaten down, the hungriest, the thirstiest, the homeless among us to be able to find some security in life? That's a good question. What would Jesus do in that case? If Jesus found somebody who had nothing but the shirt on their back, had nothing to eat or drink, and nowhere to live, would Jesus want them to be allowed in?
Look, God is the one who established borders. He is not a open borders kind of guy. Look at Acts 17. God created the idea of nations, and to have nations, you have to have a border. And look, Lou, I got to be with the president today in the Oval Office, and by the way, he sends his greetings to the...
Wow, look at this guy. Important. He knows the president. Oh, the president of the time, of course, Donald Trump. The way that they twist things around is honestly incredible. You got to give them props, right? They deserve kind of a clap for that, for how absolutely wild it is to listen to them twist things completely out of proportion. Like, I don't even know where he is now. I can't see him from where I'm standing. He is so far off in the weeds with this. Jesus wanted people to care for their fellow man. That was the prerequisite for entering the kingdom of God. You fed me when I was hungry. You clothed me when I was naked. You gave me a place to sleep when I had nowhere to live. And the sheep said, Lord, when did we do any of those things? And he said, what you did to the least of my family, you did to me. What is an immigrant, or let me rephrase, not even an immigrant, what is a refugee, if not the least among us, the most downtrodden, the people in the worst positions in life, the people who've lost everything to war and famine and pestilence? What are they, if not the least among us, the ones that need the most help? And what are God's sheep doing right now for those people?
Does God want that?
No, look, God is the one who established borders. He is not a open borders kind of guy.
So, no, God doesn't want people to take care of the poor and the downtrodden and the weakest among us, if you will. He wants to force these people to die on the other side of the border. You know what God wants? He wants to put razor wire in the water to cut children to ribbons if they try to swim to safety, as Greg Abbott did. Yeah, Greg Abbott is doing God's work, absolutely. You know, I don't believe in any of this, but if there is a hell, and if the Bible really was real, these people are going straight to hell, really. Greg Abbott, straight to hell. No purgatory, no nothing. he's going to hell for the shit that he's done. Robert Jeffress, televangelist, Kenneth Copeland, Greg Locke, they're going straight to hell if this is real. After all the things that they've talked about and advocated for and all that other stuff, it's disgusting and evil and wrong and does not represent what Jesus stood for to any degree. Anyway, tell me what you think about these people in the comments. I'm truly deeply disgusted by their positions on, like, literally all of this. This is just wrong, and it does not represent what the Bible says or reality. Tell me what you think in the comments.